Hi, I'm Karen. We're here at Montevilla Sewing Center, and today we're talking about the Pfaff Ambition 620. In this video, I'm going to talk about the accessories that you get with your machine. Okay, to start with, you have your foot control, and the foot control obviously is what powers your machine. You press down on it, just like we call it a pedal. It's like a gas pedal. Okay, and that plugs into your machine on the side. I have another video on the overview of the machine, so we can learn more about that when you watch that, where things plug in, but it's pretty obvious it's on the right side there. Okay, it also comes with a hard cover. I don't happen to have one right here, but it is a nice hard cover so that it protects your machine when you take it places, like if you put it in your car or whatever. I'd still recommend when you take your machine somewhere, put it on the floor in the back seat. That's the safest place for it. Okay. And then you have the book that comes with your machine. Now, this book here is for both the Quilt Ambition 630 and the Ambition 620. Now, this machine happens to be the 620, so there are a couple different sections here that just relate to those specific machines. Make sure you're looking at the correct section in the book for your machine. It's pretty straightforward. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the accessories that come with your machine. So to start with, you have spool caps. Now, spool caps are designed to hold the spool onto your horizontal spool pin, and that'll help keep it from sliding off or sliding forward. So the correct spool cap for the correct size of spool, if you have a small spool like this, you want to use the smaller spool cap. And also the kind of spools that don't have an end cap on them, you can also use this small spool cap to help keep this large spool on there. For your larger spools, you would use this one here. Now, if you have a spool that's in between these two sizes, the small and the large, you can just simply turn this one around and is a smaller area on this side here. Okay. Now, what's this little guy for? Okay, this is a little thread net, and what this is good for is for springy threads that tend to maybe unwind off of your spool by themselves. You'd put this thread net around the spool, and that will help keep the thread contained. Similar to what knitters use on a ball of yarn, they use a little net to kind of keep it contained on the ball of yarn, but it still flows smoothly off the ball or the spool. Okay, and then these guys here, what are they for? Well, this is if you are using your upright spool pin, or in the case of your spool pin up here, you can turn this upright. Certain threads tend to want to flow better if this is upright, so you have your either way to do it. You can sew either way. But what this does is if you have a spool of thread here and you're stitching along and you stop, it'll act like a little brake. It stops the spool from continuing to spin. That's the purpose of this felt pad. And there are two of them so that you can do twin needle sewing. And we talked about a little earlier about what twin needle sewing, but I'll show you again. Twin needle sewing is when you have two spools of thread. You only have one bobbin thread, but on the top you have two spools of thread, and hence you would use your auxiliary spool pin, which fits right up here. I'll show you how that goes, right up there like that. And then you'd use your other spool pad on each one. Okay, now over here, pick this little guy up. Okay, over here we have a quilting bar. Now, it's called a quilting bar or a guide. What this does is that you can make nice, even rows of stitching. I'll show you like this. And that way they're no further apart or no closer together. You would just stitch this along. The way this works is, well, I'll give you an example up here. So to put this on, there's a hole in the back of the foot holder right here. Loosen the screw that's above that hole enough so that you can slide this in, and then tighten it back down, and that'll keep it from sliding side to side. So you do your first line of stitching, then you'd move your fabric over to do, and line that up with your first line of stitching to do your second line of stitching. You can get that pretty close together or pretty far apart depending on how far apart you want this. What's really useful about this is along with your IDT, you can do quilting in like a crosshatch pattern on your quilt using this quilting bar and your IDT. It's a really great combination. Okay, so I'm going to take that guy back out. And whenever you take this out, make sure you tighten that screw down. It's a very short little screw. It could get lost, so you want to tighten it back down so it stays put. All right. Next, we have our tools for cleaning and taking the needle plate off and changing your needle. You have a screwdriver. I like this nice long screwdriver for taking out the needle and also for tightening the needle clamp screw. You want to make sure it's more than just finger tight. You want to make sure and use this screwdriver to get it a little bit tighter than finger tight. And then you've got the short screwdriver. That's good for over here, taking out these short screws where the bigger screwdriver wouldn't fit. Okay, and then you have your cleaning brush. Now we have another video on taking care of your machine, and in that video I show you using the cleaning brush as well as these two screwdrivers. And then also I'm showing you this in that cleaning video because this is a wonderful tool. It's a multi-purpose tool. The purpose of it is, let's say you were going over a really thick jean seam. You'd put this behind the foot. I'm going to take the IDT out of the way. And it keeps this from rocking up and getting stuck on that nice thick seam. So you'd put that behind the foot until you get past that seam, and then it just kind of drops off towards the back. It's got a thinner area here and a thicker area on this side. But what I was showing you in the cleaning video is, you see that little hole right there? That's where you could put your needle. It's a needle inserter. It's kind of like a handle to hold your needle in place instead of just using your fingertips to keep that needle up against the stopper. You can use this. It's a really nice tool. So this is your multi-purpose tool. This is also good for if you're going to sew on a button. You can use this machine for sewing on buttons. It does a zigzag in place, but this will give you a little bit of space between the button and the fabric. So this is your multi-purpose tool. Really handy to have. And then in the feet, we have your standard all-purpose foot, which is on the machine right now. That's your 0A foot. And then the 1A foot is very similar to it, except that on the back it has this channel here. And that channel is for your decorative stitches that maybe have a lot of thread in them, and you want that to flow right through. That's what that channel is for. Now notice this has the little cutout for the IDT, fits right in there in the back of the foot. The next foot does not have that. It's very similar in that it has that channel on the back, but it doesn't have the cutout for the IDT. That's because it's for a different kind of decorative stitch. This one is for your more open decorative stitches. This is more for your satin type decorative stitches where you don't want to use your IDT or your walking foot on top of those stitches. Especially important if you have delicate thread, like some of your rayon threads are easily abraded, so you don't want to have any abrasion there. So this is the foot you'd want to use. And it will tell you up on your screen here what foot to use according to what stitch you're using. So this is the 2A foot. This one is the 3 foot. Now this one is what you would use for doing blind hems. It adjusts such that you can do it closer to the fold or further away from the fold when you're doing blind hems. But this is also really nice, and I showed you this in my Getting Started video. You can use this to overcast the edge of your fabric and leave some slack in the thread so it doesn't scrunch up the edge of your fabric. Maybe some of you who have been sewing for a while, that's been a real bugaboo with your thinner fabric. It tends to get scrunched up on the edge when you try to zigzag it to keep it from fraying. This is going to help you do that. So watch that video. Just in short, you'd want to have this little guy can adjust right here. This little red thing guide. You want to have that even with the wire. And you want to use stitch number 5, which is your stitch for overcasting. And then this is your zipper foot. Now this can be put on either side of your clamp, your foot clamp, either on the right or on the left. and it makes it so that you can sew close to zipper teeth on both sides. Now keep in mind, you can only move your needle side to side so far before you get into metal, so you're going to need to watch that. If you're just doing a regular center straight stitch, this will be just fine. But if you want to get really close to one edge, say you're putting piping in or something like that, you can do that and have a nice foot for putting in piping and get your needle really close there using the stitch width or needle position button. Over here is our buttonhole foot. Now I've already got a button up there, but this will make a beautiful buttonhole. I've got another video on how to use this. It makes easy buttonholes, takes all the scariness out of it. Let's just say that. It makes wonderful, beautiful buttonholes with this foot. Okay, and then over here we have bobbins. Now you have actually 5 bobbins that come with your machine. One of them is already in the machine, so you get 4 more in your accessory bag. This is a typical class 15 bobbin. So if you already have old bobbins from a different machine that are maybe shorter or wider or rounder, don't use that with this machine. Use class 15 bobbins, and you can get them here at Montevilla. A class 15 bobbin, you also want to make sure that it's the plastic class 15. There are metal ones, but you don't want to use the metal because metal has magnetic properties that can interfere with your stitches. So just use this kind. Now, okay, let's just go on. All right, so we have here the seam ripper. Now, seam ripper is what you would use for obvious purposes, taking out a seam, ripping out stitches that you don't want, but also for opening the buttonhole. So if you have a buttonhole that you've sewn and you need to open that center, this is what you would use. I like this cap on the end here when I'm using it. It gives me something more to hang on to. Plus, it's not going to roll away because that has these little lugs on it, kind of like a pencil does, has these little lugs that keeps it from rolling away. When you're all done, just put that right back in there like that. Keeps it nice and protected. And then we have needles. Now this is the Inspira brand needles. Inspira go well with your Pfaff sewing machine. So once you're done using up these needles, if you need to buy more, make sure you get the Inspira brand of needles. It'll work best with your machine. You can use other ones like Pfaff or like Schmetz or Classe, but really Inspira is meant for Pfaff, and Pfaff is meant for Inspira. Okay. Now in here, you've got several different universal needles. Universal, pretty much like all-purpose needle. Size 70, size 80, and size 90. Those, the smaller the number, the smaller and finer the needle, and the smaller hole it'll make in your fabric as you're sewing. But also, like up here to the 90, if you're using a thicker thread, you want to use a larger needle, a larger number of needle, because there's a groove down in the front of the needle on all needles that if you're using a fine thread, small needle, large thread, large needle. Okay. Then over here we have a jeans needle. The jeans needle is meant to go through that thick denim, like this kind of fabric, and especially through multiple layers, like if you're doing a flat fill seam or something, you want to use a jeans needle. It's nice and sharp, meant to go through multiple layers of thick cotton. Okay, and then the stretch needle. It's a little bit like, you've probably heard of a ballpoint needle. It's a little bit like that, but it's even better because it's good for things like Lycra and spandex. You can also use this on regular cotton jersey too. So the stretch needle is specially meant to go between the yarns rather than pierce through the yarns, whereas like a jeans needle or a sharps needle is meant to actually pierce through the yarn or the threads in the fabric. So Inspira needles, and that's it basically. There are other feet that you can get for this machine, quilting feet and so forth like that. Take a look at what we have here at the store. If you have a specialty technique that you're trying to do, ask us. We'd be glad to help you. There's a lot you can do with this machine, and what you already have in your accessories opens up your sewing world quite a bit. So thank you for watching. We have lots of other videos on this machine and on other machines here at our Montevilla Sewing YouTube channel. If this video has been helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. And if you have comments or questions, you can leave those in the area down below. Thanks for watching. Bye.